Allan Advisors, creating aha moments, presents Aha Business Podcasts. We provide opportunities to discover information to help you run your business and guide your decision making. The more you know, the better decisions you make. For more information, log on to allanhirschadvisors.com. I'm your host, Allan Hirsch. Welcome to today's podcast. My guest is Robbie Samuels. He's host of On The Schmooze Podcast. He's a keynote speaker, a TED Talk speaker, a relationship-based business strategy coach, and is a networking expert by Harvard Business School. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So what motivates you to get up in the morning and go to work?
I think it's the impact that I have on people. I love what I do. I work a lot. I'm loving that I'm seeing transformation. I've been doing different things over the years, but the idea that you can help people see beyond what their own capabilities are and then actualize that, like that feels very rewarding. And recently I've discovered that the amount of time can be shortened. It used to be years it would take for that. And now the work I'm doing currently, this is happening within a few weeks. So it's just wonderful to see this.
So what kind of work are you doing that now that's taking a few weeks?
Well, since March, I had to shift my business from being about teaching people networking. As you mentioned, I've been recognized as a networking expert by a number of different news outlets and companies. And so none of that seems very hyper relevant right now. I contact business cards, handshakes, body language. Yeah.
And all of that's disappeared. We can't do that anymore.
So I had a definite moment in mid March, I guess it was March 9th or 11th, where it was like, how do I show up? How do I add value? And on the 11th, I decided my peer mastermind kicked me in the butt a little bit. And that led me to write a 9 ways to network in a pandemic little article. And I shared that on social on the 12th. And I thought I should probably do one of these. And so then on Friday, the 13th of March, I hosted my first weekly, well, at the time I didn't know, my first virtual happy hour. I didn't know what it was going to become. The following week is the first time I did that I can recall any kind of thing with breakout rooms. I didn't know how I had them, just like most people did not know they had them.
Right.
And by April, I was formalizing that as a weekly event, and I've now had nearly 800 people sign up, which has been wonderful. And in May, I launched a 4-week program, which is the one of the transformations I've been able to see is that people are going from really unclear about how to translate what they did in person to online in an effective way, how to design an engaging experience, unclear about the technology, the facilitation, etc. And to see people go from week 1 to week 4, and actually now it's a certification program. I've now run that 4 months in a row, and I'm now certifying people no more bad Zoom. And it's an incredible thing to see the shift in possibility. And now they can go take their gift, which is whatever their message is, whatever their talent is. But now the technology is no longer in the way. So that's been really wonderful.
So what are some of the techniques that you teach? I mean, using Zoom, I never used Zoom before the pandemic started. My appointments were all personal. And I've changed everything I've done. But what do you do? What are you teaching that's so revolutionary?
Well, I have been on Zoom for years. It's the platform I use for my own podcast interviews. Originally, I was on Skype, but years ago, I moved to Zoom. Mainly, I moved to Zoom because Skype required a password and a login, and my podcast guests, it caused them anxiety because they never remembered what that was. So I thought I'll move to something that's easier. I give them one link, and so I didn't really explore what was possible with Zoom. It was just, to me, a video conference, platform. That was period. I didn't really explore the rest of it. So I didn't know things like breakout rooms, which has been such an incredible resource to be able to bring people together and have those smaller groupings. But the main thing I've realized is that we can't just be replicating the events we had in person online. We need to reimagine them using all the digital tools available. And that here's an example. Okay, so if I give you this award-winning French cookbook, and as I hand it to you, I say, you will make the most amazing food if you just follow the steps in this book. And you pick up the book and you're flipping through and you're thinking, I don't have any of these ingredients. And, I don't know if I'm great with sharp knives, and I don't usually measure things properly. Like, how confident are you that you're going to make this amazing French cuisine? So that's kind of what Zoom is like, because if you don't have your settings right, and that's the ingredients in this analogy, if you don't have the settings, then you don't have breakout rooms. Like they just don't exist. Or you don't have whiteboard, or you don't have polling, right? Or you don't have the yes, no feature, or this is all these things you have to turn on. So that's the settings. Get that out of the way. The next piece is you have to have strong online facilitation, because facilitating in person, it's different. Someone goes on a little too long, you kind of look at them, you lean in, you might walk towards them. If they're on a stage, you might even stand up on stage next to them, put your arm around them, like convince them it's time to go. Here I am, I'm looking at you. Do you know I'm looking at you? You know what I mean? Like there'd be 50 people on the call. They're like that, and I'm gonna keep talking. So there's different techniques that you have to do online to manage the experience. And then you have to use the technology so that people know who's going to go next. And, sort of this, for me, one specific tip I'll give you, Allan, is what I call the on deck method. So that in a moment, Allan's going to go first, and we're going to be doing introductions. And now you're paying attention because you're going to go first. And so here's how I'd like you to introduce yourself. Okay, so here's the instructions, and now we're going to hear from Allan and then Ben. And so now Ben goes, oh my gosh, wait, I better pay attention to what Allan's doing because I wasn't paying close attention before, but I'm going to watch to see what Allan does. And then when you're done, I say, okay, now we have Ben and then Christine. And you notice there's always an on deck. So that's a methodology you don't need in person, because in person, it's usually pretty clear who's next because you're going in a row, right? You're going in a circle, you're going down a row. It's not as like popcorn style. And I think a lot of times we're confusing people. So there's just a lot of little things. And then the last thing I would say is the tech itself, which is, as a presenter, how do you move from your slides to just being on camera? And how do you go back to your slides? And if the answer is, I'm not really sure, PowerPoint takes over my whole window and I'm stuck. Well, now you got to go investigate other ways, because there are other ways to do that. And it's not engaging to hide behind your slides. Like 45 minutes of death by PowerPoint, followed by ineffectual Q&A and no one moderating chat, was never a great plan, and it's still not a great plan. And people are gonna that's the Zoom fatigue we're all experiencing, is people not being wonderful with their technology.
So how do you use some of these techniques, particularly the sharing your screen, so that you're not hiding behind the PowerPoint, and you're in a position to answer questions during the middle of a PowerPoint?
Well, my shortcut answer is switch over to using Google Slides, because Google Slides makes this very easy. They actually have built in an option on the bottom of the screen that lets you escape or exit. I think it says exit full screen. And you can also pop up your speaker notes as a separate window very, very easily. But on PowerPoint, and as of July 2020 on Keynote, so both PowerNote and Keynote have an option called play slideshow in window. They're called slightly different things, but essentially it's play slideshow in window. The in window here means that it doesn't take over your full screen. And if it doesn't take over your full screen, now you can see your Zoom controls. You can see your chat. You can see, the share screen option. You can switch things around. So the only thing is you don't see your notes. And so my suggestion there is to print your slides to a PDF and then open them in a separate window. So then you'll have one window, but you're sharing, which is to your slides. And then you can even cover that mostly with the notes that you have, because you don't need to see what's on the slides that are being shared. You know what's on there because it's on the PDF that you have in front of you. And then you can kind of just scroll through and kind of advance the slides as needed. So part of this is like practice. It's like knowing it's possible, practicing it, figuring out, if you have a second monitor, that makes it even easier. So what I just described was for people who have one monitor, and particularly if you only have a small, laptop to do this with, it takes some coordination. But yeah, having a second monitor, it's like an inexpensive way to really amplify what's possible, because it's not engaging. Like Zoom fatigue really comes down to two things, Allan. One is the information has to be highly relevant. So I kind of want to assume that what you're doing is highly relevant for your audience, but I can't assume that. You've got to really know that it's hyper relevant. The other one is that you have a very engaging presentation, and engaging usually means that you're interacting with your participants and they're able to interact with each other. Those are the kinds of things that make things really engaging. And if you have both, I mean, I've done calls that last 2.5 to 3.5, 4 hours. And people, like, I'm the one who has to shut it down because people won't leave. And that's right here in the middle of this pandemic where people are telling me about Zoom fatigue. if you have one of them, it might work. So if I was ready to buy a home, I'm a first-time home buyer, and I sign up for some realtor's program about first-time home buying, which is, hyper relevant for what I need. Maybe they're a horrible presenter who reads their slides, and doesn't do any of these engagement tips, but I'm going to be right there, taking notes because it's like exactly information I need. And then on the other hand, I like neuroscience. Like, it's not hyper relevant to what I do, but I think it's a curious thing, and I've seen some relevance to the work I do, and yeah, I'd like to learn more. But if I go and you're reading your slides, I might back off and just decide I can spend my time other places, right? So if you're not, that's where it's like, oh, it's not super relevant to me. Maybe it's not needed. This person's not a great presenter. I don't want to sit here being like talked at. So I think, there's the knowing how to use the technology, and like YouTube is wonderful for finding that out. Like if you want to know how to use breakout rooms and, all that stuff, there's some great tips on that. But what's usually missing in those searches is the why, is the purpose,
Well,
is the
that's
philosophy of the strategy.
right. So it's very important to understand why you're doing it and why you're trying to present it. I'm going to be doing a presentation in mid-September, September 22nd, I think. And I want to try to make it as interactive as possible in order to maintain the engagement of all the clients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And well, I guess part of this is being really clear on the purpose of the event and what is the promise that participants are hoping you'll keep. So the promise usually comes down to content and connection. Events are about content and connection. It's the reason we got on planes, if we can just like remember back that far. The reason we got on planes and went to conferences, it wasn't just for content, because we had access to content through virtual means, podcasts, webinars, YouTube, etc. Books. Books have been around a long time. But we went hoping to meet people. In fact, there was a study by the International Association of Exhibitions and Events found that 76% of people surveyed said that networking was a top driver for why they chose to attend an event. 76, 3/4 of people. Now, in actuality, how many people actually follow through with that intention? Probably much lower than 76%. So that's the work I was doing, was helping close that gap. So the message for me hasn't changed. Events are about content and connection. The medium has changed. The medium is now online. Virtual events can no longer be the exception to that rule. We can't just have these like webinars, and then which is people talking at you. You don't see the participants. Participants don't even get to ask questions. Like, we've had some really lousy formats in the past. That's Zoom fatigue. No one wants to keep doing that. But they also don't want to go to these. There's a lot of like happy hours that popped up for a while there that have no purpose. Like a happy hour was just like random people showing up to connect for a little bit. Like I think the reason I host a weekly event called No More Bad Zoom Virtual Happy Hour. It's every Friday at 5:00 Eastern, nomoorebadzoom.com. And people have been coming since March 13th, and I still attract 50 or 60 people every week. I get 100 plus people signing up, maybe 200 people signing up a month. I mean, it's been like fast. It's building momentum, but I'm still going strong because it's a mixture of content, Zoom tips, right? Zoom technique, demoing, lots of networking, lots of let's try this and experiment with this. I bring in a guest every other week to do a demo on something. And that's the first 75 minutes. And then I do 45 minutes of Q&A and demos just without anything real on this topic. And, I didn't plan for it to be a 2-hour event. It was originally an hour, and then it was an hour and a half, and then people wouldn't leave. And now it's like, I thought, okay, I'm going to end at 7 Eastern. And now I wrap by 7:30 Eastern. And it's like, people are just hungry for community. They're hungry for knowledge. And when you can find both in the same context and there's some humor, people want that. And so compared to a lot of my friends who were hosting sort of general poppy hours, those have sort of faded. And I'm not saying that they don't have a place. I think there's still a place for them. The ones who are well organized, who are, again, doing these like good techniques around breakout rooms and knowing how to facilitate the conversation in a nice way. One of the things is figuring out what questions to ask people as they go to breakout rooms. I was sent to a breakout room, 7 people, 15 minutes. Okay. 3 questions, 7 people, 15 minutes, 3 questions. How are we going to, it's like an impossible ask. And
Right.
the first question was, tell us a problem you're having right now, share a challenge. So what happened was the first person went
And
and
that
the
was
rest
it.
of and that was it. And the rest of us all started helping them.
Right.
And so depending on the question and the answer they provided, it's either a hot seat mastermind style or it's therapy. But
Right.
we didn't get this. So finally I was like, we have like 3.5 minutes left. Can we all just say hello? So I think like understanding what kind of question to ask, you could say, share a challenge you had and how you overcame it, or lessons learned, right? Those kinds of things are past tense. They share your resilience. They share your ability to like problem solve. They share the lessons you've learned. We learn a lot about you. We connect on the humanity level about that experience, but I'm not feeling like I have to solve something for you. So this is nuance, right, Allan? Honestly, this is being called Robbie's pet peeves because none of these things are egregious. They're just these minor things that add up cumulatively to it adds up to bad Zoom.
Right. Absolutely. We need to take a break run a couple commercials. When we come back, I'll continue with Robbie Samuels, host of On The Schmooze Podcast. I'm Allan Hirsch of Allan Hirsch Advisors, and this is AHA Business Podcast.
Hi, Rick Dempsey here. As a former Oriole and Series MVP, I know a lot about winning and championship teams. Today, I am happy to tell you about my award-winning web design and internet marketing team, Adventure Web Interactive. For over 2 decades, many of Maryland's most successful firms have chosen Adventure Web as their strategic partner for web design and online marketing. I can tell you from using them personally, their search engine optimization and social media programs have saved their clients tens of thousands over the traditional pay-per-click digital agency. Visit AdventureWebInteractive.com and listen to what clients such as Hercules Fence, TriStar Electric, ABC Rental, Rhine Landscaping, Markdown's Office Furniture, and many more highly successful firms have to say. And don't forget to tell them Rick Dempsey sent you.
Strengthen, protect, and preserve your retirement nest egg. Scott Garceau here for the Stephen J. Sless Group, Baltimore's reverse mortgage specialist. Reverse mortgages have evolved to become a viable retirement tool. Enjoy retirement without monthly mortgage payments, improve cash flow, pay off debt, and stretch retirement savings. Stephen and his team can offer strategies to make housing wealth work for you. If you're 62 or older, learn if a reverse mortgage could help. Visit reversebaltimore.com.
An equal housing opportunity lender. This is not a commitment to lend. Stephen J. Sless, NMLS 298581. PRMI NMLS 3094.
Welcome back to the show. Robbie Samuels is my guest, and he's the host of the Schmooze Podcast. When you were talking and started the conversation, you mentioned in March, you came up with a list of 9 things that you had to change. So what were the 9 things? I mean, you then talked about some of the things that you have to do, you think you need to do, or anybody needs to do to prevent the Zoom drag and so forth. So what are the 9 things that you outlined that you needed to do?
So the article was actually 9 ways to network in a pandemic. And it was sort of a bridge between what I had been doing and I guess what I'm doing now, in the sense that networking is not tied to in-person events. Networking is not something you only do when you get on a plane and travel somewhere. Networking is something that can happen at the DMV or the RMV. Grocery store, right? And so how do we do that online now? And one of the things I thought of was that there are people that you would have seen at an event that got canceled or maybe went online, use it still as a reason to reach out to them, or organize a peer-led discussion virtually around a topic that is related to that event. And then the one that kind of inspired all this, my third tip here, was to host a virtual happy hour, invite 6 to 8 friends. The other thing is like contact the speakers that you were looking forward to talking to and, check in with them about stuff, maybe ask a very specific and concise question and then follow up with what it is you did with their advice. And I won't want to list each one of these here, but I will also say that one of the ones I thought was sort of underappreciated, which is to actually send in a note of appreciation to event organizers who are working really hard to try to figure out how to move this online or adapt it in some way or continue to provide, that content and that the opportunity for people to connect. So just thanking them. So you'll find all of these written out nice and succinctly at robbiesamuels.com/9 ways. You'll also get a copy of that if you sign up for my weekly event on theschmooze.com. Sorry, nomorebadzoom.com. On theschmooze.com is my podcast, but nomorebadzoom.com brings you to my weekly event at 5:00 Eastern. You get a copy of the 9 Ways to Network in a Pandemic. Really, it was just about thinking about like what's happening in the world and how do we sort of meet this challenge. And Allan, honestly, I want to underscore is hosting. It's so powerful. I have a friend who lives in New York City who had been sort of on the very edges of the world of Broadway. And when the pandemic was hitting, she was like, I want to make these connections. I'm trying to make these connections. So she started to host an event. I don't know how frequently it was. It was like, I think every other week. She came to a few of my events. She learned a few things about how to run an effective meeting, social. And about 6 weeks in, she realized that a lot of these big name producers were coming to her events. And after a bit, they were coming just to her events because the other events weren't well run. And so she, was on a first name basis with these people that she looked up to and was in awe of. And now they're all connected and making different, collaborations happen.
Yeah.
So in a small moment of time, within 2 months, she went from like, I wish I could do more in this space, this very powerful Broadway space, to being someone that these big players knew and respected and thought she did such a good job. So I think that there are 3 kinds of people in the world who have an impact. They're influencers, and it's not easy to become an influencer. Like that's something you earn over time. There are connectors. Most of us are born into that. We're either good at connecting or you're not. It's an instinct. And then the thing that all of us could be is the host or the convener. Like we all have it in ourselves to take 3 friends out for lunch, or nowadays, bring 3 to 6 people onto a virtual space. And if you do that and do that consistently, that's profound. Now, how do you get better at online events? You do them all the time. So just like speaking professionally, people say, well, how do you get better as a speaker? You get on more stages. The good news is in the online space, you don't have to wait for other people to grant you access to a stage. You get to set the stage yourself by just becoming a host and regularly hosting things. So it's something that, again, I had certain instincts and I had certain technological know-how before the pandemic hit. I had interests in this area of tech. I like teaching. So in some ways, when I look back, it all makes perfect sense that I am where I am today with a 4-week program that certifies people. And so that's called the 5% Advantage program. I'm helping events bring their online, their in-person events online. I'm helping do Zoom producing so I can help facilitators and trainers and speakers do their thing. All this stuff makes a lot of sense, except that on March 11th, it didn't. I couldn't see it. I couldn't see what was around the corner for me. And I think that's true for a lot of people, that there's hidden potential in this. I'm going to call this the great pause, this moment in history.
I work with my clients, and so many of them are still thinking the same thing they were thinking back in March 11th. And they haven't taken the next step to transform their business, and their business is falling behind.
So that's the other thing. The reason that the program is called the 5% Advantage program is that I believe we have to get 5% better every time we host or present online. 5% better every single time. That's how that continuous improvement. I mean, this is not a new concept. Kaizen is a Japanese method from, long time ago. Factories and manufacturers have taken it on. I didn't know any of that. When I started doing this, I didn't know any of that. To me, it was just make sense that incremental effort would compound and lead to great outcomes. And I lived it. Like I'm telling you that I started this thing on March 13th, and March 20th, I tried out breakout rooms, and now I'm being invited to speak to you and other membership organizations and get hired by clients as an expert. We're only talking a handful of months, right?
Right.
But so why can't anybody else do this? And if they don't do it, exactly what you just said, Allan, they're going to get left behind, because the sort of mistakes and missteps that people were making. I mean, back in March and April, I went to 2 meetings where they said, okay, now we're going to go to breakout rooms. Oh, wait. There's they're not enabled. Okay. What happened is, okay, so we're going to have to all leave. And then is that okay? Well, everyone leave and we're going to come back in. Twice this happened, two different times, different people. So we leave, we come back in, they're enabled. And then as we were leaving for one of them, the woman said, okay, what I learned last time is that you got to wait 10 seconds before you log back in. And what I heard was, you didn't learn anything last time, because you would have learned to make sure things were enabled.
That's right.
Professional speakers have an AV rider, right? When they go to Marriott, they have a list of what they need for their AV. It could be a lapel. For me, I was like a lapel mic. I don't want to have the podium up on stage. I don't use PowerPoint, so I don't want the screen up behind me. Like, everyone has their specifics. Some people want a flip chart, right? So when we're doing that in person, we have a very clear checklist. But online, speakers stop doing that. So I have sort of a Zoom rider. It's a list of, here's all the settings. In fact, people can have it. This is a no email opt-in giveaway. It is robbiesamuels.com/Zoom settings. robbiesamuels.com/Zoom settings. That is a PDF that has a link to a 12-minute video that walks you through all of the Zoom settings. They've recently been updated and rearranged. So I did a new video. But you have to, that's the ingredients. If you don't have the ingredients, you aren't going to make a delicious meal. And you got to learn to then make sure that if you're going on someone else's Zoom link, that they have the things enabled. So I send this list of, here's what you need to do. Here's a video you can follow. At a minimum, I need these things enabled. And then I said, you have to put the waiting room on. And then I come in before everyone else and I check. And I'm like, okay, before we open it to everybody else, let's make sure that everything's in the right place. Here are my poll questions. I check the poll questions when I get in the room. We have to own the experience as the presenter in the room.
Yeah. So what other tips in the last few minutes can you add to help people like me, people like my listeners to this podcast, help them in what they're doing in their podcast or being involved in networking events? Some of these presentations that people make are as boring and they're terrible. They haven't learned anything.
Oh my God, bad Zoom, right? And
some of it is GoToMeeting, which doesn't allow you to meet people.
And yet, yeah, meeting. That's ironic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the other thing. I use Zoom also a little bit in like a Xerox, Kleenex kind of way. I don't mean it to be just Zoom. Zoom's a very big player in this space, and there are some features that are only possible on Zoom, like breakout rooms. But whether you're using Microsoft Teams or WebEx or a webinar format of some kind, it's always thinking about the purpose. Why are you there? And what do people hope from you? So even if it's a webinar, it doesn't mean you have to hide behind your slides. Think about that. Is there a poll you want to pop up? Do you want to make sure that here's a tip for you, a very specific one. Have someone moderating chat and set up a Google Doc between you and that person. So you're the speaker and they're your chat moderator or Zoom producer, and have them copy the question, including the person's name and the timestamp, into the Google Doc. So that whenever there's a pause in your presentation, you can just glance at this Google Doc that you can pull up. You maybe have it tucked down a little bit on your screen, but when you're ready, you pull it up and you can kind of glance and say, okay, before I move on, let me see if there are any questions. Oh, I see this one's relevant to the moment. Let me answer this one. Mary earlier, she asked this question. And then that chat moderator, Zoom producer, deletes the question off the doc so you don't have to think about it again. This is so much better than you stopping and going, all right, let's see if there's any questions. And then you sit there scrolling through and then mumbling to yourself. And oh, no, that's not well, why are people talking about cats? The random conversations happening in chat. And so, again, those questions are now also saved when there's time for Q&A in a more formal way. Maybe you're going to wait till the end to do more of it. You can even have someone write in chat, thank you so much for all your questions. We'll be addressing them more in a few minutes. Please keep them coming, so that people know you're being acknowledged. So it's just like, there's thoughtful about the design of it in a way and making sure you have the right supports. While I train speakers on how to do the rooms themselves and all these things, I do think there's limits to what a speaker can do. I think you should hire a Zoom producer if you're going to have a big crowd. If even honestly over 20 people, it can be quite a bit to manage. And if you're getting paid, like if you were going to an in-person event, you would assume all the AV was already figured out for you. So in a way, and like the team, right, and like the whole production team would be figured out, and you'd be talent. These days, speakers need to be talent, and they need to be a director, and they need to be managing the AV experience, and they do strategy, and they're often the ones training organizations, because we've seen more types of online events in the last few months than this one organization has, and so we can pull in. So we're being asked to do a lot more for this organization, and in return, one of the things we need to get is a Zoom producer paid for out of that proposal, not out of the speaker's pocket. So it's better for everyone. It's a better experience, but not every organization understands, like, wait, I'm hiring you. Why don't you just come and do it? Like, well, yeah, but you would normally have also hired the AV team. Like, you know, this is a thing you would have provided,
right?
And now you have to, I'm actually going to source the person and train them for you. The least you can do is pay their hourly.
Yeah. So, any last comments that you want to make in the last few minutes of the podcast to help the listeners?
Well, I honestly, I think I'm going to encourage everyone to really think about who they can bring together on a regular basis via an online platform, right? And just commit to doing that. Commit to hosting something. It could be a small gathering. It could be friends from your grad school. It could be your neighbors. It could be colleagues that you haven't worked with in years. Whatever it is, just say, okay. I mean, I just recently did a virtual reunion for my high school, and it wasn't a big year. It was our 28th. It wasn't like on the year that you would normally do it, but now it went well enough that we're going to do it quarterly. That means there's now 4 times a year I had the opportunity to, again, experience and practice that space. And so I'm constantly looking for reasons to facilitate, moderate, speak, host these online experiences, because every time I do it, I try to get better. So that's what I want to leave your audience with, is find a reason. This is not necessarily a thing you're going to get paid for, but it might turn into that. But it's something that you just do because when you're then being paid, you're just so much more confident. I have an 86-year-old student. She went through my 4-week program. 86, she's still delivering great content. She's amazing. And she learned Zoom, and then last minute got asked to do on Microsoft Teams within an hour's notice. And the knowledge she learned from practicing on Zoom meant that she, in an hour, got set up on Teams and basically said, oh, this is kind of all the same. I'm good. And moved flawlessly through the whole program without missing a beat. Here's a person, she likes to tell us, didn't have phones growing up. So if a person who didn't have phones growing up
well, my dad was 99 when he almost 100, and he died 2.5 months ago. And he was high into technology.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So I just think that, it's the practice of doing it that helped her get better at it, not just thinking about it, not worrying about it, but actually now she's running a Tai Chi and painting classes. I mean, these are neither of her like professions. It's not what she talks on, but it's giving her a chance to practice doing it. So this is what I implore everyone to do. Just find a reason to host something and get better. And remember, don't judge yourself in the first 3 efforts. Judge yourself on your last 3. Because, when I look back at my first podcast episodes, please be kind about my first 3 episodes. But if you want to go back and give me critique of my last 3, totally fair. Okay. So that's the thing too. It's like, we're going to get better over time, but by doing it.
Well, thank you very much for being a guest tonight.
Absolutely.
How can the listeners reach you? I know you've given a couple of websites, but how can they reach you or reach your websites and be in touch?
My website is robbiesamuels.com, ROBBIESAMUELS.com. NoMoreBadZoom.com is how to find out about my free weekly virtual happy hour, a mix of content, networking, lots of Q&A. We have a good time. That's a lot of fun. OnTheSchmooze.com is my podcast. So those are 3 great sort of places to start. I love connecting with people on LinkedIn and all the socials. So if you go to my websites, you'll find all those links as well. And I encourage you to reach out and say hello.
Thank you again very much for being on the podcast. And I wish you luck, and we'll stay in touch. I'm Allan Hirsch. of Allan Hirsch Advisors, your host. Reach me. Visit my website, www.allanhirschadvisors.com. You can listen to the podcast where you get your podcast, or within a couple of weeks, it will be on YouTube as well. So, and I'm Allan Hirsch, and this has been AHA Business Podcast.